Hey folks, this is Mark with Eigen Designs. Welcome back to my channel. Today in the shop, I'm going to be building this two-part coffee hutch with a really beautiful piece of pecan to give it a little bit of character. I'll be using my CNC to do some of the heavy lifting on the bottom cabinetry and even making my first attempt at some shaker style cabinets, and you guys can be the judge of how I did. All right, let's get going. This coffee hutch is designed to fit in this 30-inch space at the end of this client's kitchen. They want a place where they can make a cup of coffee in the morning and get those big bulky Keurig machines away from their countertops to free up some space. So I took some dimensions and brought them into SketchUp and made an overall design. A few things I had to design around, first being the light switch, which is on the wall, which we can't remove. And the second one was making the wall-mounted cabinet high enough to where the Keurig top could be open unobstructed by the cabinet above. Standard cabinets are a little bit too short for this, and pulling it out every time you use it's a little bit annoying. So with those two design considerations in mind, I designed something that the client was happy with, and then I used this design to make a cut list and get to work. Next, I'll be building the two side panels for the lower cabinet unit. I'll use my CNC to drill a series of 1/4-inch holes that will support the pegs that will hold the shelf in the bottom cabinet unit. And then I'll also do a contour cutout to get the radius of curvature just right on the bottom part of each side panel. The design process for this took about 10 minutes, and once both tool paths were generated, I sent it to my CNC and let it do its thing. With both side panels cut, it's now time to focus on the 4 legs of the lower cabinet. I'll be putting a tapered edge on 2 of the 4 sides of each leg just to make it a little more interesting and less dull. I've got a really good 60-second YouTube short on how I built this particular jig. It's helpful if you make a lot of tapered cuts like this, or if you don't have a jointer and you want to join a straight edge on a board. Once all the taper cuts were made, I flipped the post upside down and used a square to find the center of each of the posts. I then proceed to install some leveling feet, and this was a lesson that I had learned the hard way in a prior build. I spent a lot of time and energy making sure that everything was flat and square and parallel, and then I went to install it and realized that the ground that I was installing it on was not flat. So there was a little bit of wobble in my piece of furniture. So these leveling feet are a good insurance policy against wobble in your furniture, regardless of what type of surface this furniture is going to live on. To help assemble this cabinet, I'll be using a Festool domino to create a series of loose tenon joints that will provide additional strength to each of the connections, as well as help alignment during the glue up. Now, I realize that not everybody has drank the green Kool-Aid and has a Festool domino, so if you want to use pocket hole screws or even a self-centering dowel jig, both of those are fine alternatives to the Festool domino. Now that the lower cabinet has been glued together, it's time to build a drawer that's going to fit into this opening. I start off by taking some measurements and then cutting the necessary components on the table saw and then cutting them to length on my miter saw. Now I'm going to be assembling these drawers using the quarter method. So you need a 1/4 inch dado stack that's 1/4 of an inch high and set 1/4 inch away from your fence. Now I'm jumping ahead to the final product because this better describes what we're going to be making. But as you can see, this would be the front of the drawer. And as you pull on the front of the drawer, you've actually got wood material from that side part of the drawer that's actually going to be resisting that pulling motion. So it's not quite as strong as dovetail joints, but it's much stronger than a glued joint alone. So I'll be commissioning my new dado stack to make these cuts. And one nice thing about this method is once you've got your table saw set up, you never have to change it for all the cuts that you're going to be making for these drawers. As I was installing the table saw insert plate for my dado stack, I realized that the opening was far too large for the cuts that we were about to make and was going to be a really unsafe thing to do. And unfortunately, I didn't have another insert plate, so I thought a more clever solution would be to take the table saw fence and put it on the other side of the blade. This will make the cutting operation much safer in the next steps. To finish the table saw setup, I get out my 1/4 inch table saw setup guides and set the blade height to 1/4 of an inch, and then use that same spacer to set the table saw fence exactly 1/4 inch away from the dado stack. Once everything is set up, I then proceed to make all the necessary cuts. Once all the drawer pieces are cut, a little bit of wood glue is applied to the grooves, and then everything fits together like little Lego pieces. Once everything's assembled, I use some parallel clamps just to keep a little bit of pressure while the glue dries. Off camera, I installed the drawer slides, and everything came together really nicely. There's about 1/8 of an inch gap around the top and the bottom. Next, I'll be taking this beautiful pecan board and making the tabletop for the lower cabinet. I start off by taking the prettiest section and then trimming it to length using my crosscut sled on my table saw. I also couldn't help but resist the temptation to actually see what it looked like on the lower cabinet, and I really liked the way that it looked. I didn't like how boxy it was, so I took it over to my router table and I put a 45-degree chamfer around all the edges just to give it a little bit more of an interesting appearance and make it look a little bit less boxy. Once that was done, it was time to apply a little bit of finish, and like any woodworking YouTuber, I use Rubio Monocoat. Now, in this particular application, I used the Pure, and it did make the pecan a little bit yellow. Now, I don't mind in this particular application because the client's granite in their kitchen has a lot of yellowish tones. But if you're going to be using this on a very light color wood, you may want to try applying it on a sample piece just to make sure that you're happy with the final color. Next, it's time to build the upper cabinet of this coffee hutch, and it follows a very similar construction design to the lower cabinet. And I don't want this video to be repetitive, so instead of showing you a step-by-step guide, I'm just going to go ahead and show you a quick montage of how I built it. Now it's time to make the shaker style cabinet doors for both the lower cabinet and the upper cabinet. On the lower cabinet, I'll be doing a single panel door, and it'll have a 1/2 inch overlap on all sides. I'll be using a tongue and groove router bit set from Whiteside to help with this, And I start off by routing a 1/4-inch groove on the inside edges of both the rails and the stiles. This will allow the 1/4-inch panel to be inset into that groove and allow the two rails to interlock with the two stiles on the upper and lower sides. Once all the grooves were cut, I ended up switching to the other router bit, which cuts the tongues on the other pieces. I ended up doing this for the edges of both rails on the upper and lower pieces for the cabinet. After the pieces are cut, assembly's a breeze because they fit together like little jigsaw pieces. I applied a little bit of glue on the inside of the groove, slid the panel in, and then applied a little bit of pressure with the parallel clamps just to keep things nice and tight while it dried. For the upper cabinet, I'm going to be doing 2 separate doors, and instead of a plywood inset, we're going to be using some 1/4-inch plexiglass. This stuff can easily be cut on your table saw and is relatively inexpensive. One additional step I took was to apply stain on the inside edges of the rails and the stiles while I had good access to those surfaces. I don't really know if this is necessary, but it seemed like a good idea because I wasn't sure how well I'd be able to get into those corners once I had installed the plexiglass into the door panel. Now it's time to apply the stain and finish to this project. The clients requested for the coffee hutch to be color matched to the cabinet color in their existing kitchen. And I tried probably 8 different colors, and the Varathane Kona was the closest I could get to the color that they had in their kitchen. This stuff was really thick. It almost applied like a paste, and if you left it too long, it was really hard to scrub it off. And it took a little bit of finagling to get it to apply consistently. But once I got the hang of it, stain went on pretty easily and dried within a couple of hours, and then I was able to apply a top coat finish. I used an aerosol satin lacquer finish and applied about 5 coats to get the desired finish that I was looking for. Once the finish had dried, I installed soft close hinges on each of the cabinet doors. The last thing to do before calling this project done is to secure the pecan tabletop to the bottom cabinet using a series of Z-clips. These Z-clips are really helpful because they allow for wood movement as the moisture changes season to season. This is really important, particularly whenever you're dealing with wide boards of solid lumber. So with the project complete, here's how we were able to transform this space. Now, I had a ton of fun making this project, and I learned a lot of things along the way. If you got something of value or enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like below because it's a free way to support my channel. And please leave a comment below how you think I did with my first set of shaker cabinets. All right, see you on the next one.